So just nice to be here, and I hope the audience will be as aggressive to me as I was. Yeah, so we have to communicate. So, and everything else is what? You know what? It was exactly what I was kind of objecting to. Opinion. Yeah. Yes, I don't have time to express what's wrong about opinion because it will be just an opinion. So, and so just we want to discuss kind of mathematics, and it was presented here by some people in very, very eloquently, like Sarnak. And when you listen how was presenting the Swinnertine-Birch conjecture, you just want to plunge yourself into that and start again thinking and learning it. And this is, of course, a very efficient way to present mathematics, how I do it for mathematicians, but there is some drawback. It's like if fish want to explain what water is, and the fish says, just jump to the water, jump to me, especially if it's a shark, yeah? You may not want to do that, but the way sharks are very friendly. Yeah? You can communicate with sharks. It's not a joke. Yeah, just listen to they're really very friendly and very good pets and just very nice, much better than many people. Huh? But they cannot explain you what water is. I mean, we don't study water like fish does. Yeah, we make this chemistry, physics, and it's a completely different world. And in this way, mathematicians cannot explain what mathematics is. There is no frame. We have no bent of mind to do that. We have to go away and take another perspective. And this is the point. You speak about simplicity, beauty, whatever, it's just empty talk because we don't have a frame, we don't have context where to talk it. Where to put, what is mathematics? In order to make definition, you need a much broader context. What is this context? It's not there, right? However, there is a possibility, and this is a conjectural possibility. So I'm saying there is a correlation between biology and mathematics, and this is like that. So if you, somewhere in the universe, you see you have billions of decimals over E, you suspect there are mathematicians there. Probability of that is extremely low. However, if you see bacterium somewhere nearby, then probability goes by tremendous coefficient. So in some sense, that if you see bacterium around, you see mathematician next. It's just difference negligible. Okay? In the terms of course, our universe is very small, and therefore I think probability is not applicable. It's too small. But if you think if there is multiverse when there are 10 to the 1,000th universes, then maybe it makes sense. Yeah, you need much bigger sample space to make sense of this. Now, this is a. Do you know so what is a Tamil, right? Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. The point is, what is simple is what's complicated. Now, your language suggests this is concrete and simple, and this abstract and complicated. And I think it's just nonsense. Because concrete things are complicated, and abstract are simple. You see these animals, yeah, and the child recognizes them, or you recognize a human face, etc. And this thing is simple. This letters look too complicated, like because it's seen for the first time. But of course, they're infinitely more simple than this, and the speeches on one hand, right? Incomparably more simple. From a certain age, of course, you cannot really absorb them, but they're very simple. And the point is, everything we perceive as simple and concrete is a product of a work of your visual system. Your visual system occupies about 70% of your cortex. And by your logical part, linguistic, take probably 2%, right? And so, and this huge machinery working, you're creating out of what, let me, this again, just look at this. In a second, I explain why I make so many citations. What comes to your brain, this throbbing, seeming crowd, and I cannot say it better than this guy does, this Charles Sherrington. And this is mass coming to your brain. And out of this, brain creating images. And it is an immensely complicated process. I don't know what you can say about any kind of simplicity. Justifiably, though somewhat incorrectly, the brain is called the most complicated object in the universe. Mathematics is product of this thing. What is simple? Right? The visual thing before you, it's immensely complicated. No mathematician ever can imagine anything as complicated. And reproduce what happened there. How out of this mess you produce images. Yeah, and there are some data about how it happens to animals and people and children. It's beyond our comprehension. And this we call it simple. I mean, it's absurd, yeah? It is complicated. Simple things are abstract. And the more abstract they are, usually the simpler they are, and that's the one point I want to make. Another point is exactly just related to the first one, and as Byron said, and we know this process happens all the time. It's what animals and children do. Out of this chaos, described by Sherrington, they create the world. And it's really so much beyond us, it's a godlike ability. We must appreciate, we don't understand it, we match low our level of understanding of the world very well below that, yeah? So we don't understand these basics, and this is what we want to understand, right? However. And then, yes, you have some orientation, as I say, just you go away from mathematics, and you take point of view of biology and the brain, and then, again, there is the following difficulty. The brain is a tremendous mess. So kind of basically, physically, what happens, there is like a kick, energetic kicks this physical system, kicked up by impact of free energy, and then what you see is relaxation. And in the course of this relaxation, everything happens. Things go down all the time, right? And there are many, many wheels, like turned by this water going down, and this wheel being created actually by this liquid, whatever it is, energy, and our mathematical product of that. But we cannot, however, in those terms describe it. So neurophysiology has no language to describe it. No matter how much you know the mechanism of your brain, and actually one single neuron is understanding, take volume and volumes, it tells you nothing about how you do mathematics or how you do language or whatever, because there is no interface language. And before you have this language, you cannot do much. And so now I want to, this is a kind of my criticism of kind of approach from the point of view of neuroscience, and another from the point of view of artificial intelligence, and there was a huge kind of development on that, and there were tremendous hopes imposed on them, and it was, in a way, it was failure. Yeah? There are fantastic expert programs, but simply you think you can imitate, the best chess player in the world, but you cannot imitate the very poor players. Anybody playing chess, in a way, what it does is very different from what a computer does, and this you cannot imitate. And the point, I think, misconception is that the major point, not to make problem-solving thing efficiently, but to make machine, if you want to speak about chess, for example, yeah? You want to make a program that would like to play chess. Like some people play it, some like, some not, and for no reason it would do that. And the point is, by the way, this is another story, and this is just curiosity, and there is a direction nowadays in computer science. But then, by the way, this is what it is about. This picture, yes, I do it for myself to remind me of some issues. Of course, there was also psychologists thinking about mathematics or about chess. In particular, this related to Freud's point of view on chess, and Freud was describing it as a desire of child to kill his father, and then chess come from that. I think he was actually joking, yeah? Yeah. He was really a very smart man, and my impression is just, I was told by now late Flatto that he spoke to some famous man here in New York running a gallery. And he comes to this gallery and seeing tremendous junk there. And he asked, why you put this junk? Oh, he said, that's the whole interesting thing. If you take a good painting, any idiots can sell it. But I can sell any junk. And the same was saying Freud. He was saying all this bullshit because it was fun to sell it to the public. And then it was recently discovered that they have a consultant, a kind of assistant working there. It was a woman named Carlson, and then she wrote a diary, and this diary was found on some roof in Stockholm, in some building. About half a year ago, I read about that, and it gives very interesting description how this session of Freud were running. Very different from people believed, yeah. But this is another story. Actually, on my website, I have some discussion with that. And then, now why I say so many citations? There's another point related to this meeting. Because about a year ago, there was an exhibition in Paris by Cartier Foundation of Contemporary Art, which was organized together, similar to this meeting, to bring artists and mathematicians together. And the major kind of driving force among artists was David Lynch. He's a tremendously creative person. He's a film director, but he also, in all respects, fantastically creative, and he made very much of a contribution. And my role was also provide some citation of scientists and then comment on them. And then I spent about half a year just learning what people were saying about different subjects, in particular about simplicity, about mathematics, about knowledge, whatever. And then just you realize whatever you say was already said. And when I make the citation, in a way, just you think, this idea come to your mind, and then you look and they were already said and said much better. For example, here we're speaking about art and mathematics. But you know who said it? I think you never heard about this man, that art, and I certainly prefer not saying it exactly, art and science come from the same source. And this source is our kind of perception of mysterious. And those who don't have this feeling are as good as dead. Who said it?
Einstein.
Einstein, exactly. Einstein already said it. And he always said about formulas and complexity in mathematics, actually. Maxwell was making fun on mathematicians who write all these formulas without understanding them, exactly what Sarnak was saying. And Maxwell, he was emphasizing he couldn't understand what mathematicians do. And he was kind of his was very concrete and just never was doing that, never writing equations. Just for equation, he wrote, he never wrote this Maxwell equation, yeah?
Yeah.
It's Heaviside wrote them, exactly, yeah. But his 20 equations were impossible to digest. And now we come to my kind of point, which I was making, that I'm trying to make. And it is that there are two modes of thinking, and there are two kind of minds inside of us. And this is kind of reflected in this saying famous saying by Descartes. Because it is first to say, I think, therefore I am. And another is, cogito ergo sum. So, important thing is this ergo, this therefore. This is what makes us human. Our thinking, all our emotions, all our feelings, we share them with animals. We're not different from a dog in this respect. Everything we cherish, this feeling of rightness, whatever. I'm pretty certain dog has it. What dog doesn't understand, therefore. And here we are from where we want to start. And this, of course, in a primitive form, animals also have it, but in a primitive. And what makes us human, exactly this therefore, which I call ergo. And so a different way of thinking. And it's not that it's different, not that we don't have it. So my conjecture is it's the major source of our kind of thinking. But it's completely hidden from us, and there is a good reason why it's hidden. If it surfaces, you die, you will not survive. It's against survival, it's against evolution, it's against selection. And by the way, some people use usually selection, saying, well, everything is explained by selection, which is absurd, of course. Instead of saying by will of God, you say by pressure of selection. It's kind of bullshit. Because, and this was recently a remarkable book which I want to advertise by Eugene Kunin, which is called The Logic of Chance. When he says something about evolution, and there are 2 points which I want to say. First, he says, everything which was known about evolution maybe 10 years ago, just bullshit. I mean, you shouldn't see it exactly like that, yeah? Because no data were available. Everything people were saying were at least wrong, usually even not that. And secondly, just what we now know, because this amount of information, now we have 10 to the 15th power piece of information coming every 2 months, yeah? 10 to the power 15th. When it was 15 maybe, till recently, yeah? So it grows faster than computers can manage this, yeah? And on the basis of this information, there is tremendous kind of knowledge. You can use this as a telescope or microscope going to the past. You make these multiple alignments of sequences and see what's happening 3 billion years ago. So you can pretend roughly to see what was 3 billion years ago, and then there was a major event which happened in history of life, and it was, you know that, what that? It was appearance of eukaryotic cell. Right? So we were bacteria apparently before that point, or maybe viruses, and then our kind of cell appeared. And it's absolutely, the gap is immense. Yeah, it's much more difference than between you and, in an amoeba. It's just nothing compared to the difference. Yeah, amoeba is almost like yourself. And apparently, and this was, again, it was some kick of unknown reason why it jumped up in this structural complexity. It was complex, nothing simplicity, and then it was going down, and we still go down. And just all evolution, all this progress, is just decay of the structure. Accidentally, and this being explained in this book, why we have ourselves and whatever. So that what mechanism more or less brought it, but eventually everything goes right. In a couple of billion years, we come back to bacteria. This is where evolution runs. This selection where it brings us. back to bacteria. I'm just, of course, somewhat oversimplifying it, but coming back to that. So the point I want to make is that this ego, this part selected for, which serves purposes, and which is the same shared by ourselves and dogs. It's I love dogs, by the way. I don't want to be, I'm against dogs, but I don't take their opinion on science. And if you don't have your opinion motivated by a kind of dog wiggling his tail, I don't take it seriously. But seriously, we take something which is non-serious. And so our mind, I'm saying, yeah, there's another component, and it is everywhere, but we don't see it for a certain reason. Yeah, this, by the way, another about brains. You see that the dolphin and the elephant have much bigger brains than ourselves. You can say, well, because they're big. But then there is this Indian screw, this tiny little animal, which brainier than people are weight-wise about by 30%. Very smart animal. But, well, just little remark, but so, and all our mentality is distorted. It's like if you have an optical device, and as you know, it has tremendous aberration. And before you start seeing something, you have to know what aberration is. You can't, you have to correct it. And actually, this is a quite serious problem. And again, just instance of that I was observing, kind of witnessing. It was a meeting about 15 years ago when these microchips, these RNA chips, when you put things into kind of destroy tissue and extract it, and you see which RNA are there, so you can say which genes were acting. Yeah, it can be 1,000 of them you can see simultaneously. And then it is a mess. I mean, there is very little correlation. You have to analyze it. And then at these meetings, there were some people in statistics, very famous people, and they found some remarkable correlation, just explaining some remarkable phenomena. And next to me, he was sitting a guy who was making these devices, and he said, this optical nonlinearity of the device, this optical system nonlinear, what they see nonlinearity. And he was trying to say to these people, he was, shut up, it's not interesting, we made a discovery, right? So we are so much cherish our discovery, we don't want to know. There is tremendous aberration of our mind. These are the words. Yeah, these are good ideas I have to show. Yeah. Intuitive, intelligent, rational, serious, objective, important, productive, efficient, successive, useful. If these are in your mind, you're on the wrong track, if science is concerned. Of course, in your practical life, these are keywords. If something you find, if you think you're intelligent, if you think your thought is rational, if you think your ideas are useful, it's kind of nonsense. I mean, forget it. I mean, I'm slightly exaggerating, but that's the principle. On the other hand, the right is they must be interesting, meaningful, informative, funny, beautiful, curious, amazing, surprising, confusing, perplexing, predictable, nonsensical, and boring. By the way, here there was a lecture about boring, and I was wondering whether it was mentioned that there was a rather serious study conducted about the effect of bore on animals and also on people. As you know, being bored is the major punishment in the modern society. Prison is a punishment by boring, right? And this is a major kind of a disaster which may happen to you, being bored. And animals, you just cut their life by a factor of 2 if they are bored. So it is really one of the horrible things happen to you. And we don't quite realize it. Interesting versus boring is by far more important than useful versus not useful. So, and this is the point. And so that's a kind of basic premises from where you may start developing this alternative way of thinking. They kind of feel logical. There is nothing rational. There is no reason to be all these words, rationality, intelligence, whatever. They're a product of your ego mind. Its role for you to help you survive and make your genes go into next generations. They have nothing to do with the reality of the world which you want to analyze. It's very interesting that so the principle which I observed before, and I think I stick to that, if you have a common opinion about some phenomenon, which phenomenon may be verified, it's not just empty words, but definite, and you just take a vote of people who are not experts, and the one they will be voting for will be least close to the correctness. And historically, we know how it was happening. For example, usually single person, a very small group of persons realize what is right, and then the thing is kind of obvious. A famous example in recent time is the discovery of inertia by Galileo. Everybody believed otherwise, right? And there is a good reason for that. Do you know that there were also experiments, observations done by students in Berkeley, I believe, just quite recently, about how they perceive the laws of Newton. So they were checking if when they're doing demonstration of this law in the lab, help them to understand the law. But what they discovered in the course, almost no one believed in this law. When they pressed the exam, they would say, yeah. But when they were relaxed, they would say nonsense, of course. Of course, it's not true. If you have thing rotating, it goes freely, it goes by the circle or like that anyway, right? Because Newtonian mechanics, apparently, non-Newtonian mechanics built into your mind for good reason. And actually, from this ergo position, you can explain why. And what is the exactly kind of model you have, and it seems to be rather realistic to what we observe from pure mathematics. Well, I have very little time. So maybe go to the next slide and see what it tells you. Yeah, this is, by the way, another thing. Look at that. Some other people were analyzing our mind, and in particular chess. Chess, again, is a kind of model of mathematician. Etienne was objecting to that very simplistic model, but even that we don't understand at all. And see what Wittgenstein was saying, the meaning calling king, etc. Is it a joke? I mean, just he was saying the bullshit seriously. Yeah? I mean, I think he was making fun of you. Yeah? And I'm a complete idiot just to. You have audience of idiots saying to them, because some of them believe maybe that he eats the pieces depending on their color or whatever. Yeah? And Wittgenstein goes on and on and on explaining that. Yeah? And this, of course, typical with this kind of discussions. And again, the point is, yeah, but so let me, yeah, well, maybe I have to start this anyway. So now just I want to say a few words of, this was, as I expected, a long time of criticism. The question is where you can start. And so there are indicators, even from our behavior, hidden. What are the basic mechanisms creating your mentality, including mathematics in your mind? And these things are different from axioms, and they're kind of simple. And the reason they're simple, because they couldn't come by otherwise, because nature had no time for that. Humanity was very small. The moment when this therefore developed was tiny little. It just was a few million years, couple of million years, yeah? And we became kind of therefore people. We have this ergo tremendously developed. And it's come from very simple thing. You just change a little bit, one base here on one base there. There's no time to make something complicated. So it must be simple. But because it's so simple, we cannot access it, yeah? And the point which you can observe certain patterns which you come like on the back of your thinking in mathematics, much more primitive than axioms, and they're by no means rigorous or whatever. Just let me give my final example. And this is called by clustering, one of the mechanisms involved. It's not the only one, but one mathematically significant process, mathematically actually quite interesting. It's called by clustering, which classify objects according to how they interact with other objects. And when this was applied first to languages, it was observed that the particle the and e were in different categories, but the and his wasn't the same. Right? So you take the three words, and the and his will be in one. And for English-speaking people, it was absolutely absurd, and people were arguing. However, this is exactly the point. When you're outside like myself, this immediately I would say, okay, of course it's so. For a foreigner, the and his are in the same group, and a separately, because you know you can substitute there by his, but you can't substitute there by a. Yeah? And then linguists were fighting this for a while, but then they realized that their concept of particle was wrong, and then a were nothing in common. It was historically they were in the same category for trivial reasons. They are different, right? So going from outside, even just into the language, and again I must say, my understanding of Russian much less kind of significant than of English. Yeah, phenomena in Russian don't observe them, like fish in the water. You don't see them. And this problem with our mentality, as mathematicians, we immerse in this, we cannot see it. And the only way, you have to go look from outside, not from thin air. You have to base you in something, and something is science, which I admit I don't know well enough. It is biology, neurophysiology, things which give you back a standing point, but still, of course, you, as a mathematician, all you can do is mathematics. But I have no time to explain what mathematics potentially may be there. And just I say maybe one word, just for mathematician here, what is in mathematics the nearest to what may happen in your mind, not in the brain. I don't have no idea what happens in the brain, or not in your mind, but in this hypothetical ergo is something like n categories. The n categories, something of this nature, apparently are there, and I just can give some justification. And the B clustering is instance of this numerical realization of actually of two categories. Okay, my time is over.